In this video, we're going to build a full stack app that reads a random good first issue from GitHub's API and sends it to you via email or SMS. We'll also display it in the browser. We'll be using NextJS to build the full stack project, which is a React framework that also comes with an API. This will allow us to rapidly build our full stack app, and we will also use Novu, the open source notification platform that helps us switch between different email providers to SMS providers, templates, and so much more. Behind me is an example of the email that you'll get, and you can customize this as much as you want. If that sounds interesting to you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and while you're down, subscribe to my channel for more open source goodness. Let's get coding. Navigate to the directory where you want to create your project, and then we're going to use the npx command to create the Next.js project. So we'll use npx create next app, and we're going to use the latest version. And the third parameter is the name of the folder and the project. In this case, I want to call it video daily issues. Hit enter, and it's going to create the project for us. Just takes a few moments. Now it's completed, it actually gives us some instructions of what to do. Don't forget to navigate into the project directory. I always forget that all the time. So let's go into the project directory, which we called video daily issues. Now in that directory, we can run the project with npm run dev. I always highly recommend checking the project is working as we go along at each step of the journey. In this case, we can do it by running the app, which we've done, and we can visit the URL localhost 3000. Let's just check the app is running. So localhost 3000, you can see now the app is running. This is the default vanilla page that Next.js gives us when we create a new project. The next URL I recommend you visiting is the API. So I mentioned Next.js is a full stack app and it comes with an API. If you visit localhost 3000 /API/hello, you'll see example JSON data. And it's a really good thing to check that the front end and the back end are both working. The next thing I do is open VS Code. So we can do this by typing code. And it will open VS Code in the project that we're working in. When I'm building my apps, I like to start with some hard-coded data in the API and have it displayed in the UI. Then when we get real data from a database, or in this case, GitHub's API, it will still all work accordingly. Let me show you. Let me give you a quick overview of the Next.js directory structure. The folder you're going to be most interested in is the pages folder, and Next.js comes with some amazing and powerful routing, so you don't have to worry about configuring this. It works quite like magic. If you create a new file in the pages folder and then you visit it on your front end, Next.js will present the contents and the response of this file. And the same goes for the backend, for the API. If we create a file in the API directory that's also in pages, when we visit that on the URL, it will present us the JSON as we saw with the example API/hello. But in this case, for this project, we actually don't need this hello. So we could actually delete it, and then we're going to create a folder called issues. So you can group files together under folders and it becomes part of the root. So if I renamed hello to issues, then if we visited /API issues, it would present what's in the issues.js file. But however, I want to nest it and group some of these together, because in the future we might build on this. So I want it to be in the issues directory. If I don't want it to be API/issues/issues, I can use index.js and it will take the name of the parent directory. Let me show you. So the root for this file will be API/issues, and that's it. There's no /issues.js as Copilot is suggesting, because index is a magic name and it'll take the name of the parent with no additional appended path. For Next.js to work its magic on the API, we need to export a default function called handler that will take two parameters, and it's going to be request and it's going to be response. And you can see Copilot's automatically completing that for us, and we can hit tab and take that and customize it accordingly. So we actually want to return some of the hard-coded data that we're going to be expecting later on. And yes, we are going to get this from GitHub's API shortly, but for the moment, let's just get the app working itself before we connect a third-party API. So in this case, I want to create a constant issue, and we're going to remove this later when we connect the API. The type of data that we're going to get from the API will be a lot more, but we'll map it to this structure. So we're going to want a name, and in this case, we can say issue test, And next we'll want to pass through the author to the UI as well. So we will take this data. In this case, we'll say it's Eddie. And then we're also going to want to pull through the labels from GitHub's API. And this will not be a string. This will be an array or a collection because there will be more than one. So we'll just take the defaults here from Copilot. And the last thing we'll want is the URL of the issue. So if it comes via email or on the web front end, we can go visit that issue and have a look at it if it's something we're interested in. So in this case, we can just make up a URL. I'll just say it's github.com/EddieJow. But when we read from the GitHub's API, this is all going to be real data. This is just enough for us to get started. And then we're going to want to pass that back as well. So there we go, issue. So we can actually visit this. Mustn't forget to run the app again. I did stop it to open VS Code. And so now it's running. We can actually visit this on the API. So now I've deleted the hello file. You can see it's 404 not found. But we can go to API issues, as I mentioned, and we can see the JSON coming through here. We've got the name, the author, and labels, and URL as we hard-coded in the API. So now we've got the JSON data being displayed via our API, we can actually consume this in the React front end. So if we switch back a tab, this is our React front end and nothing on this has changed yet. But we can now go to the next file we need, which is index.js in the pages directory. And we've got all this boilerplate code that came with it, but we can remove a lot of it. So I'm actually going to delete everything under the H1 all the way down to the closing main tag, but not including the closing main tag. And then we can say, welcome to daily issues. And if I also update the footer as well, I don't need this link either. And we can just say powered by open source and hit save. Now we save this, the front end will change, it will automatically reload if the app is running. But underneath this, we do want to display our actual random issue. At the moment, again, it's hard-coded. I don't need the image import either. So when we get the data, we're going to want to display it under the H1 title. So for now, I'm just going to hard code it in the front end. And this will make sense in a moment because we'll replace it with the API data that is also hard coded. I did mention a lot of hard coded data in the front end and back end, but I do want to make sure that it is working each step of the way. So we said in the back end that we would have name, author, labels, and URL. So here we can say name, then we can say author, and then we can say URL. So if I hit save, we also had labels, so let's put labels in there too. So we can say labels. So if I hit save, then I'm going to see it displayed on the front end, but this is obviously not the data from our API. So we're going to do that next. But I've kind of got the layout roughly. It's not perfect, but you can always make improvements to this as well. To fetch the data in the front end from our NextJS app, there's a few ways to render your content and depending on your application's use case. These include pre-rendering with server-side rendering or static generation, updating and creating content at runtime with incremental static regenerations, and client-side data fetching with use effects. Have a look at the official documentations. They have some great examples of when you should use which use case and which one will match your situation best. We're going to use get server-side props, which will pre-render the page on each request. And the way to do this is we're going to create a new function above the React component, and we're going to call it get server-side props. And what it will do is we'll get the data before the page loads and pass it to our home component function. And it will look like this. We're going to export the function and it's going to be async because we're going to have an await in there. And the function is going to be get server-side props. And when this function returns props, it's going to get passed into the home component that I'll show you in a moment. But before we do that, we actually want to make a request to the API. So we'll create a constant and then we'll await for the request. We'll do a fetch and we're going to fetch from localhost 3000. Copilot has finished it for us. Thank you very much. And we want to turn that into JSON. So we will say constant data and we're going to await for the response.json function. And now this is when we can return the data to our component before it's rendered. So we'll return the object that has the property called props, and then it also has the data. And you can return multiple data objects and so on. This is why we're calling it data. We could actually put more data in there, or we could add siblings to the object. So I mentioned we need to pass this into the component. The way we can do this is it gets passed in to the home component as data. And now we can use data in the HTML. So if I replace some of these with data.name, and then the author will be data.author, and labels is an array. So we could do data.labels to string, or join is one of my favorites as well. Let's join it with a comma and a space after it. And then let's get the URL. So before we had it hard-coded, as you can see, name, author, and labels, you're actual hard-coded in the UI. Okay, now that I save it, we're gonna see it appear in the front end as it reloads the page. And you can see we have issue test, Eddie Joud. This has come from the backend API. And I'm gonna prove it to you by making some changes in the hard code data. So we've got issue test. Let me just put number 2. I'm gonna hit save. We will have to refresh this because we've made a change to the API, not to the front end. So if I refresh this, you can see now number 2 appears in the front end. So we've got data coming all the way from our API to our front end, which means it's working correctly end to end. And then we're going to add the third-party API, which is GitHub's API, to make the data completely dynamic. So the next step is going to be, let's make the data really dynamic from GitHub's API, and we're going to use the OctoKit library. And we can do this. I want to stop the application because we're going to install npm dependencies, and we'll want to restart the application after we've installed those. So we'll install the dependency with npm install OctoKit. Now that's done, we can import the library in our backend. We can say import OctoKit from OctoKit. Perfect. We can now use it to query GitHub's API, but first we must create an instance of the OctoKit object. So inside our handler function, let's create a constant OctoKit, and we're going to create a new instance of the object OctoKit. And we're not going to pass it any parameters. But when we do query for issues, we don't want to just search all issues. We do want to have a filter. We want to filter it down. So what I would like to do is create a constant called Q, and this is where we're going to just put our labels that we want to search for. So I want to make sure that it is open when we search for issues. I also want to make sure it is an issue, and I want the label to be good first issue. And you can change these, you can combine them, you can mix and match them as you wish. Then next, we actually want to make the request using this. So here we can do const, and we're going to have a response, and we're going to await the OctoKit, and then we're going to make the request, and the request is a get, and it's going to be to the search endpoint for the issues resource. And then we'll pass in the query parameter we created further up. This query will get us many issues, and each issue will have many fields. We don't need all of those. So we're going to loop over the data using a map, and then we're going to return the fields that we're most interested in. In this case, we can say results, and we're going to say response.data.items, and we're going to do a map for each item. And the items that we want are name, and it's going to be item.title. So they call it title, but we're going to map it to name. And we're going to also want the author, as you saw from the hard-coded data below, we want the author. On GitHub, they call it user.login. And then next, we're going to want the labels. But the labels themselves are a collection of objects, so we're going to have to do a map on those as well. Otherwise, it's just too much data that we don't actually need. So we'll say item.labels, and we're going to do the same thing, map over the individual label. And from that, we only want to return the name. You can see Copilot is helping us out a lot here. And lastly, we want the URL. And in this case, it's the HTML URL from the object that's returned from GitHub. So now, this is looking pretty good, but we're going to get a collection, lots of results. We only want one, so we need to pick one at random from the list that we've got. So we can delete this hard-coded data. We no longer need this anymore, but we do need to make a random selection. And the best way to do this, I would recommend, is we'll create another constant and we'll call it random, and we'll use the math object and the floor function. And as you can see, Copilot is helping us out a lot here. And we'll do length +1 because the length won't start from 0, but the collection will. And then we can return the results and pick the random item out of that collection. So now we've got our random value, which is going to start from 0 to the amount we have in the array. And then we're going to pick that random number out of the results array. And then we're going to send that back with a status code of 200 to the API, and then the front end can consume that. So we mustn't forget, now that we're using an await, that we actually must put an async in front of this function. We hit save, and then we also want to start our application up again because we stopped it while we were installing npm dependencies. And now that's running. If we go to the API and refresh it, we actually have a real issue from GitHub's API. This isn't what we hard coded. And if I refresh again, we'll get a different one. So now this is working on the API. We should be able to see it working on the front end because the structure of the JSON hasn't changed. We've just removed the hard coded part as we went along. So if anything did go wrong, we would know where the error was. So now if we go to the front end and refresh, you can see we have got a real issue from GitHub. If I refresh again, you can see it changes. These are random issues from GitHub's API, and they're real, in real time from the projects and issues on GitHub. So now we've got this part of the app working. Let's do the notification side. So how are we going to make it so that people can subscribe to get these daily issues? Well, what I suggest we do is we create a data folder in the project. And then in this data folder, we all can create our own JSON files who want to get the notification. The reason why I say don't have one file with a list of people with their data, yes, that would work. However, as people want to make changes to it, they'll get lots of conflicts. So from my experience, it's actually better to have an individual file for each person. Therefore, they can be merged in separately and not cause any conflicts. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to give it my GitHub username, and I'll give it the extension JSON. In this file, we probably need some basic information. So we're going to have name. So therefore, when the email gets sent, it is displayed and it's personalized with the person's name. So in this case, as you all know, my name's Eddie Jowd. And then we'll want an email. So next we will put our email, eddie@jowdstudios.com. And later on, we can have it optionally, there's a phone number if we're going to send SMSs. And again, we won't have to make any changes to our code for that to work. The Novu platform will take care of that for us. So I'm going to save that. And we could add another person as well. Let's add Sarah. And in here, Sarah will have the name as well. And Sarah's email. So next we want to read the files in the data directory and the contents of each file. We'll use a node called library fs and path, that's file system and path, to help us do this. So let's import these at the top. There's no npm install required for these because they're part of the core node modules. So we'll import fs and we'll also import path. We don't want to send notifications to everyone each time we refresh the page, for example, checking things in the UI or someone else is reading the API. We can add a query parameter, for example, send, and if it's true, then we send the notification. And the way we can do this is at the top of the function, we can say constant, and we can pull out the send parameter out of the request.query. So the query is the object in the request object, and we're going to pull out send. So every time we are going to want to create an instance of the OctoKit, and we are going to want to query GitHub, and we are going to want to pick one at random. So I think we keep all that the same. The only thing that's going to change now is if there is the send parameter set to true, then we're going to want to send it. So we will say if send, then we're going to want to read the directory, read the contents of each file in the directory, and then send the notification. So we'll create a constant of the files, and what we'll do is we'll use the file system, so fs, and we will read the directory synchronously. And then what we'll do is we'll use path resolve data, and that will give us all the files in the data directory. And the next thing we're going to want to do is create a constant of users. And in this case, we're going to map over every file, and we're going to want to return an object. And the object is going to be the contents of the file. So we're going to grab the file name and we're going to read the contents of the file, and we're going to pass it with JSON. And then the reason why I'm putting this into an object is because I want to add the file name to the data, because later on we might need that. So let's pass the reading of the file. Again, we'll do this synchronously. And Copilot has pretty much, I think, completed that for us. It is, however, missing UTF-8 at the end. We do need to make sure that we have the encoding type UTF-8. And then here, file, in this case, is the file name. So let me just recap. We're going to map over every single file, and this is the file name. And then we're going to get the path for each file. So we know it's in a data directory, and we know this is the name of the file. So that will give us the path. In this case, data eddiejoud.json. And then when it loops around a second time, data sarahjoud.json. And then we're going to use read file sync to read the contents of that file. And then we're going to use the spread operator to spread the object and create a new object, which will also contain the file name. So therefore we have that in the data being returned. We are almost done. For each user, we want to create a new email notification, and this can be achieved with a few lines of using the Novu notification platform. The first thing you want to do is create an account on the Novu platform on web.novu.co, and it'll look something like this. I just logged in with my GitHub account. You can click on the login with your GitHub, and they require the minimum information. It's just your public GitHub data. As I mentioned, Novu is completely open source. This is their GitHub repo behind me. Do go get involved in their open source project, and they have a Discord where you can chat to the engineers and other people in the community. A link to their open source GitHub project is in the description below. Go check it out and let me know what you think. Then the first thing we want to do is go to the integration store, and you need to connect one of the mail services. So Novu doesn't actually send the mail, it uses one of the mail platforms or SMS platforms to send it, but it handles all that abstraction for you. I signed up Mailjet, and you click on connect on the one that you want. And in this case, if I wanted to use Mailjet, I input my API key from the Mailjet platform, API secret, and I put in the from address and also the sender name. And you can enable and disable and update this as you need to. And you can connect multiple ones if you need. So now you can see this one is active because it's the one that I've connected. And as you connect more will become active. So now let's go back to the notifications tab, and here you want to hit new, and you want to create a new notification. So here the notification name is going to be good first issue, and this is the channel that will be used in our code, and you'll see that shortly. I want to keep it with the group as general and the notification description. So as you can see, this is an internal description. So this is going to be GitHub's API good first issue. So I'm going to hit create. And it actually gives you the code that you need to get started with. So you'll import Novu, and we'll do this shortly. And then you create the Novu instance of the object with the API key. And then you will trigger the email notification to the channel that we want. And in this case, it's good first issue. And then in the first part of the object, you will see that it's the required information. And then in the payload, we can add all the additional properties that we want to be included in the email. So you can see here, we're back at the list, and we can see the notification name, good first issue. This is used to identify our type of notification and the template. So now let's go back into this notification template, and let's add a channel. Where is this notification going to go? And you can always update the notification name and the description later on as you need. So let's add a channel. So I'm going to choose email, but you can choose SMS, and you can have multiple. And let's give the subject line. So we're going to say daily good first issue digest. This is the subject of the email. And then here you can actually use the editor, or you can use custom code. I'm going to keep it straightforward. You know, I like to keep things simple. I'm going to use their editor. I'm not going to upload a logo, but you can do this. And my message is going to be something like this. So hello, and we're going to pass in the person's name. We have that from the JSON file. And then under that, I'm going to probably say the title of the issue. Then under the person's name, we'll have the title of the issue. I'm going to wrap that in quotes just so it stands out in the email, and we're going to say it's by the specific author, is a good first issue. And then what we probably want to do is also include the labels. So we could say labels, and then under that, we probably want to say read the full issue on, and then we can pass in the URL. Have fun from the daily good first issue team. And then we can click update. So just to clarify, in this situation, the name, the title, the author, URL labels are all going to be sent to the email from our code, but the email template itself is not in the code. This allows us to make changes to the email template without redeploying any code. However, if you prefer to have this in your code, then that is also possible too. So next, we're going to want to install the Novu library so we can then use it in our project. So it's Novu node. Now that's finished, we can also import it at the top of our project. So next we want to create the Novu object with the private token. I want to put the private token in an environment variable so it doesn't get committed by mistake. And NextJS really helps us with this, so we don't have to create this logic ourselves. NextJS will allow us to create an environment file. So in this case, we can call it .env.local. And we can put this in here and it will load it into our project. So in our code, we can actually use it. So we can say new Novu, and then we'll pass it in from the process.environment and we'll call it Novu_token. So therefore this is not going to be committed and we can change it for different environments, all via the environment variable. So in this file, we'll want the name to match. So we can say Novu token equals whatever we put in here, so ABCD, will automatically appear in our project when we run our project. So the token is never committed, but is available to our project. This env.local, you can see it's slightly gray. It means it's ignored by Next.js. And I can show you that down here. If I go to the git ignore file, you can see anything with env.local, and it's got a wildcard in the middle, will be ignored, so won't be committed. So now I've added my token, I can close this file, and we know it's now available. But if you do change anything in the env.local file, make sure you restart the app, so therefore it is loaded into your application. That will not reload the application on save. So next we're going to want to loop over the users, so we can say users for each, and for each user, we're going to want to send a notification. Next, we want to create the Novu trigger, and we can get some example code from the notification section. Click on the notification template we want, and then down the left, you've got trigger snippet, and you can see it's got some example here of how to use it. So we've done this part already with the API, and next we want the trigger. And the first parameter is the notification name. So in our case, it's good first issue. And then the second parameter will be the object of the two, which will contain the recipient. And it can either be an object or an array of objects, which will contain the subscriber ID and the email or phone number credentials. And the other property in the object is the payload, which is any additional parameters that we want to send through to the template on the Novu platform. So in the second parameter, we're going to have the first property is going to be 2, and then we're going to need subscriber ID. And in this case, it needs to be something unique. So we will use the user's email, and then we actually want to send it to that person's email too. So we will also send it through to their email. And the other property we want in this object is the payload. And in the payload, we want to send through the other fields that we wanted to see in the email. For example, title, author, labels, and URL. So name is going to be their user's name. And then title is going to be the issue title, and the author is going to be issue.author. And then with the labels, we're going to want to join the array into a string. So we could say issue.labels join, just like we did on the front end as well. And then mustn't forget the URL, because that's really important. People are going to want to go visit the issue. Let's start the application again with npm run dev. And if we visit the API, it should work exactly the same. We get different issues each time we refresh it. And if we go visit the front end, again, we should get the same thing, different issues each time we visit it. It's never going to be the same as when we visit the API because they're picked at random each time it's reloaded. And we should have no notifications in my email. And maybe I'll add a console log just to prove it to you. If I do a console log of the users, and those are the ones who will get the notification email. So if we look in the console log, and if I refresh the API, and refresh the UI, just to prove to you that there's no console log in here. However, because we've got this send parameter, which is coming out of the query parameters, we can add that to the request, and then we'll get sent the email. So on the API, if I add send equals true, it should send the email notification. But no, we get an error. No problem, errors happen all the time. Really important to read the description. So it's saying can't read property of readDearSync of undefined. So it is saying to us that readDearSync doesn't exist on the object fs. So let's have a look. Fs is defined, but I've imported it incorrectly. It does not need to be like that. It needs to be like so. So now if we hit save and refresh the API, Okay, we have another error. Again, that's also fine. So let's read the error. It says issue is not defined. That's also fine. So we're using issue here, but what I need to do really is remove the selected issue out of the collection further up. So we have that available. So I'm going to change this and I want to call it issue. So that's going to get returned on the API, but it doesn't exist yet. And before we do the send, so just after the random, I'm going to create issue and I'm going to pull out the random issue out of the collection of issues. So just like we were sending it back, but we're doing it slightly further up. So now this time round, third time lucky, if I refresh the page, it should work. So again, it works as normal. And if I go to the console, it should have the people that it sent it to. So you can see, let me clear that and let's show you one last time. So if I remove the send out of the URL, nothing appears in the console. And if I add the send to true, you can see it's sent to Sarah, or sent to me and sent to Sarah, and anyone else who submits their JSON file. So let's go check our emails and see if that works. So the email has come through. You can see it's got the subject daily good first issue digest, but you can see I've made some mistakes and these are not getting translated, but the author is. So my name isn't and the title isn't, the URL is, and the labels are, you can see, but I've made a couple of mistakes. So did you spot them while we were watching? If you did, let me know in the comments below. So here I've put some spaces around name, and also title I think is fine. Let's update that. But what I realized what we've done is we've said issue title, but actually from the mapping up here, we called it name. So I will put that back to name. And maybe that's something we should make it more consistent and actually put title on that. Again, let me know what you think in the comments below. So I think name will now, or title will now be fixed. So if I refresh this page with the parameter send equals true, we can now see it has got my name and it has got the issue title by the author. And this has only got one label on it and the URL. So I can click on this and go visit this issue and see if I want to work on it or not. So move codebase to ES6, you can see it all matches up with what's directly on GitHub. Let's conclude. Having notifications in your application which sends emails or SMSs does not have to be complicated, and it can be integrated with only a few clicks, and as you can see, with a few lines of code. In addition, having Novu takes care of the heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to worry about integrating with different providers, or if you ever want to switch, it's one standard way to integrate and Novu takes care of the rest. If you've been following along and you want to work on this further, here's a few ideas to inspire you. You could do a cron job that triggers the email at a certain time by hitting the API, or even a GitHub action to trigger the email at a certain time, again, just by making a GET request to our API. What ideas do you have? Leave a comment below and let me know. I'd love to hear what ideas you have and what you'd like to build by sending notifications. I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to chatting to you in the GitHub Discord so we can chat between live streams and video. Link in description below.